What if I told you that right now, as you're watching this video, there's a system making decisions about your life that you've never seen, never agreed to, and can't challenge? And here's the wild part. That system might be using the color of your skin, your name, or your zip code against you without ever mentioning any of those things directly. This isn't science fiction. This is happening right now, affecting hundreds of millions of decisions every single year about who gets hired, who gets loans, who goes to prison, and whose pain gets believed by doctors. And today we're going to break down exactly how this works, why it's happening, and what's being done about it. Because this affects you, whether you realize it or not. Let's go. So here's the thing that's absolutely blowing my mind about this whole situation. We built these AI systems, these algorithms, to make things fair, to remove human bias from the equation, to make decisions based purely on data. Sounds great, right? Except there's a massive problem. The data is us. And we have been biased for centuries. Think about it like this. Imagine you're teaching a child how to play a game, but for the last 100 years, that game has been rigged. The child watches, learns all the patterns, and becomes incredibly skilled at playing the rigged version. Then you hand that child the referee's whistle and say, "Okay, make sure everyone plays fair now." That child doesn't know what fair looks like. They only know the game they observed. And that's exactly what's happening with AI. Let me show you the numbers because they are staggering. Black mortgage applicants are 80% more likely to be denied than comparable white applicants. Not different applicants. Comparable ones. Same income, same credit, same financial profile. 80% more likely to hear no. In the criminal justice system, risk assessment algorithms flag black defendants as high risk at nearly twice the rate of white defendants with similar backgrounds. Similar profiles, dramatically different outcomes. And in healthcare, this one really got me. Algorithms have been systematically underestimating how sick black patients are, which reduces their access to care programs by more than half. More than half. These aren't edge cases. These aren't glitches. These are systemic patterns affecting millions and millions of people. Now you might be wondering, how does this even happen? How does a computer program become biased when it never explicitly looks at race or gender? And this is where it gets fascinating. There are 4 mechanisms at play here, and they feed into each other in this really insidious cycle. First, training data. Machine learning models learn from historical data. Data created by humans. Data reflecting human decisions. And those decisions carry decades, centuries, of discrimination baked right in. Here's a perfect example. Amazon built a recruiting AI trained on 10 years of tech industry resumes. Sounds smart, right? Learn from what worked before. Except when you train on a decade of male-dominated hiring, the algorithm learns that masculinity is basically a job qualification. It started penalizing resumes that contained the word women's and downgraded graduates from all women's colleges. The system wasn't trying to be sexist. It was trying to find patterns. But the patterns it found were the patterns of historic discrimination. Same thing happened with facial recognition. The landmark gender shade study found commercial facial recognition systems had a 0.8% error rate for light-skinned males and a 34.7% error rate for dark-skinned females. That's not a small difference. That's one group getting nearly perfect recognition, while another group gets wrong answers more than a third of the time. And why? Because the benchmark datasets these systems trained on were 79 to 86% lighter-skinned faces. The AI literally didn't know how to see certain people because it wasn't shown enough examples of them. Second mechanism, proxy variables. This one is sneaky, really sneaky. Even when you explicitly exclude race or gender from a model, algorithms find workarounds. They find proxies. Your zip code? That correlates strongly with race because of decades of residential segregation. Employment gaps on your resume? Those correlate with gender and disability. Your name? It can signal ethnicity. A 2024 study testing state-of-the-art language models on resume screening found that white-associated names were preferred in 85% of comparisons. And here's the part that made my jaw drop. Resumes with black male names were never preferred over white male names. Not once. 0% of the time. The algorithm never asked about race. It just learned that certain names correlate with certain outcomes, and it kept that pattern going. Third mechanism, feedback loops. And this is where the whole system starts to spiral. Once you deploy a biased algorithm, it starts generating data that confirms its own bias. Take predictive policing. police departments started using these algorithms to predict where crime would happen. Sounds efficient. But the algorithms flagged historically over-policed neighborhoods as high risk. So more officers were deployed there. More arrests happened. And the model learned that yes, these areas really are more dangerous. An analysis of almost 6 million predictions found the software disproportionately directed patrols to low-income Black and Latino neighborhoods, while wealthy white areas went years without a single prediction. A 2024 study in Nature showed that AI actually amplifies human biases, and then humans internalize those amplified biases. It creates what researchers called a snowball effect, where small errors in judgment escalate into much larger ones. And fourth, opacity. These systems are black boxes, complex neural networks with millions of parameters that defy meaningful explanation. Even if you wanted to challenge a decision, even if you suspected discrimination, how do you prove bias exists inside a system no one can fully explain? Now let me get specific because this affects real people in very concrete ways. Employment. 79% of employers now use AI in recruitment. That's not a small subset. That's the vast majority of job applications going through algorithmic screening. Remember that Amazon AI? That wasn't an isolated incident. HireVue, which has hosted 33 million video interviews, faced complaints that its speech analysis AI works worse for deaf and non-white applicants. They dropped their facial analysis features after criticism, but only after acknowledging those features contributed just 0.25% to predictive power. The EEOC filed its first AI-related lawsuit against iTutor Group. And guess what the algorithm was doing? Automatically rejecting female applicants over 55 and male applicants over 60. Just automatically saying no based purely on age. Over 200 qualified candidates rejected. The settlement? $365,000. And there's an even bigger case happening right now. Workday, one of the biggest HR software companies in the world, disclosed that 1.1 billion applications were rejected using their tools during the relevant period of one lawsuit. A billion applications, and the court has conditionally certified a nationwide class action. Lending. This is where the disparities get really clear because we can measure them precisely. The markup analyzed over 2 million mortgage applications, controlling for 17 financial factors. Same income, same credit, same everything that should matter. Black applicants were 80% more likely to be denied. Latino applicants, 40% more likely. Native American applicants, 70% more likely. In Chicago specifically, Black applicants faced 150% higher denial rates. CNN investigated Navy Federal Credit Union and found white applicants had over 75% approval rates for conventional mortgages, while Black applicants had less than 50%, a 28-point gap, and that gap widened from 11 points in 2018. Researchers estimated a race premium of 7.9 basis points on interest rates. That might sound small, but it adds up to approximately $756 million annually that Black and Latino borrowers pay extra nationwide. Criminal justice. This is where things get really heavy. ProPublica's investigation of Compass, the risk assessment algorithm used in jurisdictions across the country, found Black defendants were nearly twice as likely to be falsely labeled high risk when they did not go on to reoffend. 45% of Black defendants were falsely flagged, compared to 23% of white defendants. Let me give you two specific cases from that investigation. Brisha Borden, 18 years old, Black, arrested for stealing an $80 bike. The algorithm rated her 8 out of 10, high risk. She committed no subsequent offenses. Vernon Prater, 41 years old, white, prior armed robberies on his record. The algorithm rated him 3 out of 10, low risk. He subsequently stole thousands in electronics. After controlling for criminal history, age, and gender, Black defendants remained 77% more likely to be flagged as high risk for violent recidivism. And here's a mathematical reality that researchers discovered. It is literally impossible for any risk score to simultaneously achieve equal accuracy across groups and equal false positive rates when base rates differ. Some form of disparity is structurally unavoidable in these systems. Predpol, one of the biggest predictive policing companies, saw its model mirror the bias in arrest patterns so closely that one scholar called it a crime production algorithm. Los Angeles dropped it. Santa Cruz became the first city to ban predictive policing entirely. The company itself, Geolytica, ceased operations completely in 2023. The current incarceration rate for Black adults is 5.3 times higher than for white adults, 1,186 per 100,000 compared to 222. Healthcare. And this one really drives home how algorithmic bias isn't just about opportunity, it's about lives. The most precisely quantified case comes from a 2019 science paper analyzing the Optum Impact Pro algorithm, which affected 200 million people annually across the US healthcare system. The algorithm predicted healthcare costs as a proxy for health needs. Logical on the surface, right? People who are sicker use more healthcare, so their costs would be higher. Except Black patients face barriers to accessing care. They generate lower costs not because they're healthier, but because they're not getting the care they need. So at identical risk scores, Black patients had 26% more chronic illnesses than white patients. The result? Only 17% of patients identified for extra care programs were Black. If the bias were corrected, that number would be 46%. The algorithm reduced Black patient enrollment by more than half. Not through malice. Through a seemingly neutral technical decision about what to measure. And this extends to medical devices too. Pulse oximeters, those little clips that go on your finger to measure oxygen levels, failed to detect dangerously low oxygen in nearly 12% of Black patients compared to less than 4% of white patients. During COVID, this meant delayed treatment eligibility. People died because a device couldn't read their skin correctly. Facial recognition. And now we're talking about wrongful arrests. NIST's evaluation of 189 algorithms found 10 to 100 times higher false positive rates for African American and Asian faces compared to Caucasian faces. African American females had the highest false positive rates of any demographic group, and this has produced documented wrongful arrests. Nearly all known cases involve Black individuals. So let's talk about Robert Williams. In Detroit back in 2020, he was held for 30 hours for a watch theft he didn't commit. The thing is, he was only the 9th best match in a facial recognition search. Eventually, he received a settlement of $300,000. Now, moving on to Niger Parks. In New Jersey, in 2019, he spent 10 days in jail, all because of a blurry fake ID photo. And honestly, he had never even been to the location in question. He'd never owned a driver's license either. Next up is Portia Woodruff. In Detroit, in 2023, she was arrested while 8 months pregnant for a carjacking. The actual suspect? Well, that person was visibly not pregnant. And then there's Randall Reed. In Louisiana and Georgia, in 2022, he was arrested for thefts in Louisiana, despite never having visited the state. He eventually received a settlement of $200,000. Today, 17 cities have now banned government facial recognition use, including San Francisco, Boston, Oakland, Portland, and Minneapolis. Oh, and Massachusetts became the first state with comprehensive regulation. Okay, deep breath. I know that was a lot. But here's where we turn a corner because this story isn't just about problems, it's about solutions. And honestly, momentum is building faster than you might think. The EU AI Act, entering full application in August 2026, is the most comprehensive framework we've seen. It classifies AI used in employment, credit, law enforcement, and healthcare as high risk, requiring risk management, data governance, documentation, human oversight, and transparency. Penalties reach up to 35 million euros, or 7% of global annual turnover. In the US, enforcement is emerging through existing agencies. The EEOC's iTutor Group settlement established precedent for AI hiring liability. The FTC's Right Aid enforcement required a facial recognition ban after systematic failures with darker-skinned individuals. That was the first algorithmic unfairness action under Section 5 authority. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has explicitly stated that black box models don't excuse a company's responsibility to explain adverse decisions. New York City's Local Law 144 pioneered mandatory bias audits for hiring algorithms. Colorado's AI Act prohibits algorithmic discrimination in consequential decisions. The White House blueprint for an AI Bill of Rights articulated 5 principles around safe systems, discrimination protections, privacy, transparency, and human alternatives. But it's not just regulation. The auditing ecosystem is maturing. OrcAA, founded by Kathy O'Neill, who wrote Weapons of Math Destruction, conducts audits using an ethical matrix framework that incorporates perspectives from affected communities. HireVue actually commissioned an OrcAI audit and then removed their facial analysis features because of what they found. The Algorithmic Justice League, founded by Joy Buolamwini, who conducted that gender shades research, developed the CRASH framework for uncovering bias. Participatory design approaches involve affected communities in building these systems. Partnership on AI's guiding principles emphasize that participation is a form of labor that should be recognized, and that stakeholder engagement must address inherent power asymmetries. And we have concrete evidence that fairness is achievable when prioritized. Remember that Optum healthcare algorithm? Once researchers demonstrated the bias, the company modified it. They achieved 84 to 86% bias reduction. NIST found that algorithms developed with diverse training data showed no dramatic differences in performance across racial groups. The problem is not that fairness is impossible. The problem is that fairness must be prioritized, measured, and enforced. So what does this all mean? What's the takeaway? We're living through a moment where the systems that shape our lives are being rebuilt from the ground up with AI at their core. And the decisions we make now about how to build these systems, how to audit them, how to govern them, will shape opportunity and equity for generations. The research is clear. Bias is not inevitable. It stems from identifiable causes, training data, proxy variables, feedback loops, and opacity. Each can be addressed through deliberate design, rigorous auditing, and robust accountability. The question is whether we'll build the governance systems to make AI serve equity rather than erode it. This isn't about being anti-technology. I love technology. But loving something means holding it accountable. It means demanding it live up to its potential, rather than accepting its failures as inevitable. Every person deserves access to the resources needed for dignity and well-being: income and work, health, education, political voice, equity, justice. When algorithms push people below those thresholds, denying jobs, loans, healthcare, and freedom, they undermine the very foundation of a just society. But we can build differently. We can design systems that are distributive by design, transparent by default, and accountable when they fail. We can create AI that actively reduces inequality rather than amplifying it. The hopeful reality is that momentum is building, regulators are acting, researchers are developing better methods, affected communities are organizing for accountability. The conversation has shifted from whether algorithmic discrimination exists to how we're going to fix it. And that's a conversation worth having. That's a future worth fighting for. If you found this valuable, drop a comment below. Let me know what you think. Have you experienced algorithmic discrimination? Have you seen these systems in action in your own life? I want to hear your stories. And if you want to go deeper on this, I'll link some resources in the description. The research, the organizations doing the work, and ways you can get involved. Because this isn't just about understanding the problem, it's about being part of the solution. I'll see you in the next one.